G'day guys, welcome back to your one-stop shop for football coverage. Feel free to like the video if you get something out of it. Today we're getting into the 10 greatest teams in the history of the UEFA Champions League. Going from the 1992-93 season through all the way to now, which we're in the recording of the video, is including the 2025-2026 season. So we're getting into the top 10. I've got a black eye for this video, so please forgive that. I've been doing Muay Thai for about 20 years and clearly still not very good at it, so please forgive that as we go through the video. But getting into number 10 is the team who everyone really got into in high school big time. There was a lot of, when I was in high school here in Australia, they were very cool, very fun to watch. They had a front three of Ronaldinho, Samuel Eto'o, and a very young Lionel Messi. It's 2005-2006 Barcelona. Phenomenal team. You also had another guy, Deco, right in behind them as well, who was just a creative playmaker, a bit of an absolute genius back there, and that sort of front diamond were really fun to watch when they were on song. And some rock solid defenders as well, and a very experienced Lilian Thuram, and a man who may have already been the captain, frankly, just about, Carlos Puyol, also in the centre of defence. But yeah, very, very strong. Absolutely smashed through the group stage. 16 points out of a possible 18 points in the group, and then also had a for and against of 14 points differential. But still got a tough draw in the round of 16 against Chelsea. Beat them 3-2. And then we had a tough semi-final against a team who made the final the previous year and go on to win the next year, AC Milan, beating them 1-0 in aggregate, and then finally 2-1 in the final over the Arsenal Invincibles team from a few years earlier, who finally made that golden era of Arsenal players led by Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira, finally made it through to the Champions League final, but they couldn't get it done against this amazingly fun Barcelona team. So yeah, the original sort of like great Barcelona team of the 21st century, led by Ronaldinho in attack, comes in at number 10. So what we're basically doing with the rankings is the how close they got to getting knocked out of the competition. And because this Barcelona team, they smashed through the group stage, but they had 3 different instances where they won by just the 1 goal in the knockouts, despite having a very tough draw, to be fair. They end up going through at number 10 on this list. Number 9 was a bit more of a surprise. I kind of expected the 05-06 Barcelona team to be on here. Didn't necessarily expect 2020 and 2021 Chelsea to be on the team, on the ranking, but we'll go through why that was. We had cemented winning their group over the closest rivals Sevilla with a comprehensive 4-0 win in the second leg against them. Then they had a bit of a more favourable draw, I think, than the previous ranked team, where you had Atletico Madrid and Porto. They took them aside and then finally took on Real Madrid in the semi-final, where they really stepped up, winning 2-0 at home in the second leg in London over Real Madrid, who obviously would end up going on to win the Champions League the next year. And then finally in the final, getting that 1-0 win over a star-studded Manchester City team, which was another year where we sort of had this great team who couldn't quite win the Champions League for several years. You know, the previous year you had Paris Saint-Germain finally make the final and go down 1-0 to Bayern Munich, and it happened again this year with Manchester City being a star-studded team who had never won the Champions League, going down to Chelsea in the final. These guys, it was interesting. You had a bunch of like players who I think haven't quite reached that peak since. I think N'Golo Kante probably was the best player in that sort of squad, but you also had Jorginho, who was just actually was a Ballon d'Or contender that year, could have potentially caused an upset to win. Edouard Mendy in goals. There was Mason Mount, who, remember him being like an English prospect through this sort of golden generation of English players. So yeah, you had a few different players who really sort of like thrived under Thomas Tuchel, and we'll have to see this year with England how they go at the World Cup. This video is being filmed just before the World Cup in 2026, so I'll have to see how Thomas Tuchel does. Can he get the best out of England like he did get the best out of Chelsea before? But this team, much like this England sort of team at the moment, very defensively sound, and that's kind of how Tuchel seems to get the best out of his teams. Next up, we have another surprise. Number 8 was 1996-1997 Borussia Dortmund. These guys really dominant through the knockout stage of that year's Champions League. Had a bunch of sort of like a bit of a throwback, they were mostly just German players. Not like we'll see with other teams in this list where you get just an amalgamation of all these superstars from all around the world. Andreas Muller was the heart of the attack in attacking midfield at number 10. Jürgen Koller was the heart of defense as a centre back. You had Matthias Sammer and Paulo Sousa as well as defensive midfielders who were rock solid. They came second in their group after just missing first on goal difference, but then through the knockouts they were incredibly dominant. Includes a 2-0 win over Manchester United in the semi-final. They won over a star-studded Juventus, who featured, of course, a young Zinedine Zidane, featured Alessandro Del Piero. They beat that Juventus team 3-1 in the final. So very, very strong knockout stages for Borussia Dortmund, and that's why they're in this list. Number 7, we fast forward a little bit to 2001-2002. This is very much a Galacticos team. David Beckham isn't there yet, but Real Madrid have signed all the stars. They've got a few guys who sort of like were originally in the team, had been in the team for a while, like Roberto Carlos at left back. You had Raul up top at striker, but joining him was Ronaldo Nazario as well. Just in behind them was Zinedine Zidane. On the wing, you had Luis Figo. You even had like a young, very young Iker Casillas in goals as well. And even just someone like a destroyer like Claude Makélélé at defensive midfielder was on fire as well. And this is sort of like the peak of that, second run of Real Madrid Galacticos team after the 50s team who won the first 5 European Cups in a row. This is sort of like the second time Real Madrid have really gone all out, just buying a whole bunch of the world's best players and seeing how much success they could have. They easily won the group, even though the group did include a team like Roma, who had won the Serie A the previous year. Then the format was you'd play in a second group as well. So this was essentially, instead of like the early phase of the knockouts you'd have here, you go into a second group. They won that easily as well. Then in the quarterfinals, they took on their first big test after coming down from 2-1 down against Bayern Munich. The same Bayern Munich who had been the champions the previous year. They ended up coming back from 2-1 down to beating them in the quarterfinal, in a really star-studded quarterfinal. That was a real heavyweight contest. Then, of course, you had their age-old rivals Barcelona in the semi-finals and winning 3-1 over them. And then finally in the final was actually the closest they got to actually getting knocked out. But thanks to an amazing Zinedine Zidane goal, which if you know it, you've seen the volley. It's incredible, one of the greatest goals of all time, and Zinedine Zidane cemented a 2-1 win over Bayer Leverkusen and in the final. Number 6, we're going into a bit more of a modern era. This is the Pep Guardiola Tiki-Taka 2010-2011 Barcelona, which very much played similar style to the great Spanish side of the late 2010s, the late 2000s to early 2010s, including Messi, Xavi, Iniesta. David Villa was also up top as striker, which is not bad to have. Great guys in the back line like Abidal and Dani Alves. Cesc Fabregas joined this team as well late in the season from Arsenal, so ended up coming back from a 2-1 down against Arsenal in the round of 16 in a real tough battle. Then of course you had they got a 3-1 win over Real Madrid in the semi-finals and a 3-1 win over Manchester United in the final. So this was sort of like a really fun sort of battle between... You didn't get many of them in the Champions League finals at all. I think this may have been the only one, but Cristiano Ronaldo versus Lionel Messi actually happened in the UEFA Champions League final here. And it was Messi's team who came out the best in Barcelona, getting the 3-1 win there. And again, the closest they got to getting knocked out was the round of 16 against Arsenal. So very, very impressive, where they still came back and showed how good they were. Next, we get another team who sort of were a bit like Borussia Dortmund in 1996, 1997. This is the Ajax team of 1994, 1995. Just a team of mostly homegrown sort of players from the same country. But you did have Jari Litmanen, who was probably their star, to be honest, the greatest Finnish player of all time, right there at number 10. But a bunch of like Dutch greats who would go on to be fantastic players for the national team in the late 90s, and especially feature at the 98 World Cup, like Patrick Kluivert as the striker. You had Frank Rijkaard as the experienced sort of player right in the middle of midfield, and sort of playing all over the place. Mark Overmars on the wing was electric fast. He was very, very quick. And then obviously the other wing was Finidi George. So they had a very, very good sort of like front four with Kluivert at the front, Litmanen just in behind, and then on the wings you had George and Overmars. And Clarence Seedorf in the midfield as well. They won a group including 2 victories over a very strong AC Milan side, who their previous winning year from 1993-1994 almost made this list. They beat that AC Milan side led by Baresi and Maldini at the back twice, 2-0. Then as we went on to the knockout stage, they smashed Bayern Munich 5-2 in the semi-final in a series of games which was pretty flattering, honestly, to Bayern Munich. And then finally taking on AC Milan once again in the final, and this time beating them 1-0. So faced AC Milan 3 times. I've talked about the great attack of this Ajax side, but faced AC Milan 3 times and conceded 0 goals over all 3 games. Really, really impressive. Now we get into Manchester City of 2022-2023. We mentioned how they almost won the Champions League in 2021, and then this time they finally got it done a couple of years later. Again, sort of similar to the Man City of this era we're getting into, with Erling Haaland at the front, absolutely dominating, one of the greatest pure goal scorers of all time, an absolute force of nature at the front. But then you also had in defensive midfield Rodri, and a bunch of great players in between them as well, in the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Julian Alvarez. Just so many great attacking players. John Stones and Ruben Diaz is one of the all-time great centre-back pairings at the back as well. Ederson in goal was fantastic as well. Just breezed on through the group stage and the round of 16. Had their first really big test, however, in the quarterfinals. They were definitely the harder side of the draw, but swept aside Bayern Munich 4-1 in aggregate in the quarterfinals. 1-1 in the first leg against Real Madrid in the semi-finals, and then one of the greatest performances we've ever seen in football, I think, was Manchester City, especially in the first half of that second leg against Real Madrid. Won that game 4-0, so defeated them 5-1 in aggregate. And then they could have been potentially number 1, but it's just in the final where they sort of struggled to win. That was a real coin toss of a final. They did get it done. They beat Inter Milan 1-0. A very tough Inter Milan, who had won a Milan derby in the semi-finals to get through to the final. It very much seemed like the winner of Real Madrid versus Manchester City would go on to win the final. But sure enough, it was a very close final, very exciting, and just 1-0, but there was enough for Manchester City to get it done. And of course, it was that man, the very, very underrated Bernardo Silva, who got the goal in the final. Then we go into number 3, and it is 1997-1998 Real Madrid, which is sort of before you get to the Galacticos era of the early 2000s, where Real Madrid are buying, the likes of Zidane, they're buying the likes of Ronaldo, and with this one, they're just kind of like their original team. They've got Roberto Carlos, they've got Raul, who would star for them through the 2000s as well, but you've got a bunch of great players from Eastern Europe sort of like leading the attack, in Predrag Mijatovic, you've got Davor Suker, you've got Clarence Seedorf, who obviously we've mentioned already in the Ajax team of 94-95. He then joined Real Madrid a few years later. And he's in this team, led by Fernando Hierro at the back, in the center of defense. And a good preview of how good Croatia would do at the World Cup later that year, because you've got Davor Suker, you've got another great fullback along with Carlos and Robert Jani. And defeated the defending champs Borussia Dortmund in the semi-final 2-0, and Juventus, who again sort of had a run of a lot of finals appearances but no wins. So they were beaten by this great team, including Del Piero, Zinedine Zidane, going down 1-0 in the final. So Real Madrid 97-98 comes in number 3. Now the top 2. Should be pretty obvious when you've really looked into it. Not surprised. These two were a pretty clear top two. And we've got the only Bayern Munich team to make the list, but very, very deserving. The 2019-2020 Bayern Munich team, led by Robert Lewandowski at the front. And then you also had, of course, like Joshua Kimmich, who had moved into the midfield from right back and really thrived under Hansi Flick, who insisted that we needed his playmaking sort of ability in there. We had Thomas Muller, obviously finding space every which way, one of the greatest at the front as well. We got one of the greatest keepers of all time in Manuel Neuer at the back. And we've sort of got like on-field like coaches as well. Guys like Muller sort of like helping out winger Serge Gnabry with his on-field sort of coaching. Even at the back, that also, in helping Gnabry get his best season ever we've had seen from him so far. Same thing with David Alaba at centre-back, also helping out Alphonso Davies, who really emerged as the greatest Canadian player of all time this season, at left-back with his incredible speed. Basically had a pretty tough draw, had to take on Chelsea in the round of 16, but absolutely demolished them 7-1 on aggregate. Then COVID happened. We sort of like had a bunch of the knockout games were just the one leg then. But that's certainly all they needed. In the semi-final, of course, it was an iconic 8-2 win in one game over Barcelona. And this is a Barcelona team, led by Lionel Messi, who had very nearly reached the final of the Champions League the previous year and probably would have won that final if they were there. But obviously it was the classic Liverpool comeback that prevented them from getting into the final the previous year, but they weren't close at all this time. This Bayern Munich team, led by Hansi Flick, absolutely dominated, and 8-2 win. The toughest challenge did come in the final. This is where they sort of dropped down a little bit into number 2, and they just won the final 1-0 over Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain's only appearance in the final for this like era of the team, and until they would go on to win finally in 2025. But very tough sort of 1-0 win to complement just an amazing Champions League season for Bayern Munich. And finally, number 1, it's MSN. It is 2014-2015 Barcelona with Messi, Neymar, Suarez. Very cool. It's sort of like led by one great player from the greatest player of their respective eras from these three superpowers of South American football with Argentina, Brazil and Uruguay. And this is where Barcelona had switched from the tiki-taka style to a bit more like just get the ball down to the front three and they'll create something, and a little bit more of a direct attack style. Xavi was now kind of on the way out. Iniesta was still a very key part of the team. But I think with Xavi sort of being on the way out, that kind of, and with Luis Suarez coming in, with Neymar coming in, it's sort of like it garnered in this new era of Barcelona. And I think Suarez is incredibly underrated this year. He may have been the star for the team, even though really it was Messi, but he was absolutely incredible. He was so unselfish at number 9 and would often hold the ball up. We've talked about Benzema doing that with Real Madrid, and certainly Luis Suarez filled that role perfectly to help set up Neymar and Messi for some amazing goals this year. Absolutely smashed their way through the competition. It was phenomenal. Also had Javier Mascherano at the back of the midfield. Ivan Rakitic also had, like Mascherano, I think had his best ever season this year as well. Busquets was still very much heavily involved as well, so it was an absolute star-studded team. Bounced back from an early 3-2 loss to Paris Saint-Germain in the group stage to end up winning the group and on the way beating Paris Saint-Germain 3-1. Then you got the round of 16, Manchester City with a 3-1 win over them in the round of 16. They run into PSG once again in the quarterfinals, but beat them 5-1, and this time very comprehensive in like a best of 3 series that year. There's really let's mention them as the conquerors at PSG. Then we go into Bayern Munich in the semi-final. Again, as you can tell, not an easy draw. This is very tough. They got Man City, they got PSG, they got Bayern Munich in the semi-final, but obviously in the first leg they sort of wrapped it up 3-0 win, and then ended up holding on 5-3 on aggregate. And then finally in the final they defeat a Gianluigi Buffon-led Juventus team 3-1. Really dominant. No one could get within one goal of them through the knockout stages, despite them having a really tough draw, like I said. And apart from just that early loss from PSG, it was just the most dominant UEFA Champions League season we've ever seen. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and feel free to like and subscribe for some more coming up. For more football videos, more football coverage, feel free to subscribe to get some more videos, and I'll see you guys in another one.